Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Darrell Brooks saga. It feels weird saying that after all this time. I'm sorry. I've just been having those weeks where I don't know, work is too much and you get home and just want to lay down and then you wake up and do that again. It's been difficult, but I'm back. I'm not gonna do. Rory's back here too. Look at her. I'm gonna try. It's just I just can't control work, so I'm sorry. Um, but we're gonna continue with this. I'm not gone. I'm not gonna stop doing videos. And even after we're done with Brooks, we still have tons, literally tons, thousands of trials to go. So the channel's gonna exist, and that I'm gonna continue to put up videos for you guys because I enjoy doing that. So bear with me within these times, but we gotta continue. Okay. With as always, the link to the original edit of this in the description. Let's get right into the video. Alright, so a recap for me mostly is that the judge was doing her sentencing remarks, and Mr. Brooks was being Mr. Brooks, and he got sent to his corner right here.
I can see on the screen there is a head set on the table should he choose, but I have confirmation that the audio and visual are working in the other courtroom. Before I continue, of course, Mr. Brooks does have a right to be present for his sentencing. He's been present all along today up until his disruption. It was very clear to this court that he had absolutely no intention of stopping his tirade. I think there's really no other way to describe it. And this court needs to go through its remarks uninterrupted.
And it's always really funny when Brooks gets removed because he directly challenged the judge to remove him. He was like, remove me then. Remove me then. And she was like, okay, I'll remove you. And he was like, what? Why are you removing me? I should be present here.
Given the history in this case, which is well documented, of his disruptions and inability or unwillingness to follow the very simple rules of decorum and courtesy, which include not interrupting the court, I felt it important under Illinois versus Allen to remove him from the courtroom. As that is, of course, one of the options, and we have the benefit of the wonderful technology here in this courtroom and the adjoining courtroom, which I believe is the equivalent of being present, what I have referred to at times during this trial as the functional equivalent of being present in this very courtroom. But it is important that...
Yeah, he always complains about not being there to see what happens on the courtroom, but you don't need to do that. You just need to sit there and listen.
That I go through this without interruption to make the record that I need to make. Backtrack. No, you're not muted, sir. You're going to listen to me, and you're not going to interrupt. So I want to, I don't want to call it a tangent, but I'm looking for a note that I made.
I would like to exercise my right to be present.
See? He first is like, remove me. He defiantly asked the judge to remove him. And now he wants back? Why?
Then you need to pledge to this court, sir, that you will not interrupt me despite what you may not like me saying. Can you do that?
I would like to exercise my right to be present.
All right, he's not making that pledge, and under Illinois versus Allen, unless he makes that pledge, he's not coming back into this courtroom.
Good.
You are not.
I would like to exercise my right to be present.
All right, clearly he's going to keep repeating that statement, so I have muted him at this point. It was my hope that he would honor the simple rule of courtesy and decorum, that he show respect to this court, to these proceedings, and not interrupt and talk over me, but that clearly is something he is unwilling or unable to do. When testimony or statements by the court or statements by the prosecution team become unfavorable to him, he lashes out and he disrupts. And that has been borne out time after time after time during this trial. One of the things that I did note regarding Erica Patterson's testimony, because frankly I wasn't sure where Mr. Brooks was going to go with his own defense, based on some of the remarks he made during his opening statement, which was actually later, but I guess I'll go back to my review of his recorded interview and some of the things that he tried to say, and at least it became apparent ultimately with the way he cross-examined witnesses. I wasn't sure if he would
Hello, Mr. Brooks. What do you want?
claim perhaps someone else was in the vehicle, he was afraid of police, the tinting of the windows, some of those things. Here's where it frankly doesn't matter. Okay, Erica Patterson provided key testimony in this regard, that there was no one else in the vehicle with Mr. Brooks. And I'm aware that he wants to come back, but until he writes me a pledge that he will not interrupt me under Illinois versus Allen, he is not coming back in this courtroom. He has forfeited his right to be present during my remarks. And unless he makes that pledge to me in writing, he's not coming back in.
Good.
One of the things I tried to do in my preparation, and let me tell you, I reviewed all of my notes from this trial. I have, I think, 9 notepads.
9 notepads in around 3 weeks of trial. That's a lot of writing.
I looked at just a couple of exhibits, but primarily the map, Exhibit 15. I really wanted to determine for myself how long this carnage took. We know the distance, right? From at least where he entered. And you know what, Madam Clerk? Put my screen up, will you? I'm going to put Exhibit 15 up because I think it's worth doing that. All right. We know he entered from White Rock, where the first star is on the right side, where it says Fleet 1, unmarked sedan and marked SUV. And that's where Detective Casey was. And so we know he goes 1, 2, 3 blocks before striking anyone. And then it's really about 5 blocks of what can only be described as chaos and carnage. We know we have, from the evidence and the testimony, 2 different speed calculations. One from Bosco's, that was the surveillance footage, between 33 and 34 and a half miles per hour. And then we have one farther down from the footage from Curry Insurance, where it was an average 32 miles per hour. Now, I acknowledge math is not my strong suit. I did not do a calculation, but I don't think it took very long.
No.
For all of this to happen. I think it was a matter of minutes.
Less. If you go 30 miles an hour for 5 blocks, that's at least a mile. I guess. I don't know how long are the streets, but it will take less than a minute to go through all of that.
I think 5 minutes would even be far too long.
Yes.
It's probably 3, maybe.
If that.
And it was somewhat hard to gauge during the trial because of how the state presented, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but they were very meticulous in showing video, breaking it down, showing it at half speed, sometimes 30% speed, to really get an understanding of what was happening. And at no point did anyone ever tell me or tell the jury how long this took. But even though it took just a couple of minutes, there were so many opportunities for Mr. Brooks to simply stop, turn around, turn down other streets before he ever crossed Barstow Avenue. And what we know is that at 4:37, Detective Tom Casey had the first police encounter with Darrell Brooks. Came face to face. Detective Casey at the hood of the car, coming eye to eye. The SUV brushed past him. And here's the thing. Detective Casey said he wasn't going very fast. To me, that tells me he had ample time to reflect about what he was about to do.
Just stop.
If you look on that map,
Yeah.
it's not a pledge, he's not coming in.
Yeah, I'm sure he just wrote, I exercise my right to come back, and that's it.
When you come down White Rock, you can take a hard left on East Main Street. You can take what I call a soft left. I believe it's Pleasant Street. And Detective Casey, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I can't see it on the map. Frankly, you can turn around at any point in time on White Rock Avenue.
Look at him. He's so confused. He's like, but I wrote the paper. What is wrong? She asked you to pledge to behave. That's it.
But instead, and I think if you all try to picture this, as difficult as it may be, there's squads with lights, there's barricades. I know I read in the other act's motion that Mr. Brooks claimed at one point he was having a panic attack, and he, again, maybe I think he was going to claim at some point he was afraid of police. Why drive toward them? Why take that right hand?
Now we have Mr. Brooks doing his dance routine. I think he's trying to invoke the judge so she can let him back, but she's not gonna do that.
And turn. There's no reasonable explanation other than he was angry, he was full of rage, and he didn't care who he came in contact with, what he came in contact with, whether he drove past, through, at, he drove.
Yeah.
Detective Casey pounded on the hood of that car, saw his face, again, was brushed by that SUV, thankfully not hurt. All of this preceded by the visual signs along White Rock Avenue of the staging of this parade. Floats, bands, banners, signs, people. And as you got closer to Main Street, the spectators lining those streets, which both, I believe, Detective Casey and Sergeant Warner said were thousands of people. Before he ever gets to Barstow Avenue, he comes in contact with, after Detective Casey, Officer Buttrin and Officer Schneider. He has an opportunity, if you look at this map, he could go right on Buckley. Again, there might be police, there might be barricades. You simply stop. You ask, can I get out? No doubt in my mind,
He's still so confused. He's like, he's doing this. But the judge already told you. She told you that she was not going to take you in unless you wrote, I pledge to behave.
police officer there would have done just that. He could have gone left on Northeast Avenue. Continuing down, he could have gone left on Martin Street. Continuing on, Barstow Avenue. This is where the parade participants, unfortunately, he has contact with them. But he could have gone right on Barstow. He could have gone left on Barstow. And we know from some of the footage that we saw that his car was seen flying past, true, not hitting one at this point, but flying past. There's no logical understanding for Mr. Brooks other than he's in the middle of a parade and he can see them. Anyone driving a vehicle would see what's ahead. And we know from this map, right, what was ahead of him. We saw that video footage. We heard the testimony. Many police vehicles at these intersections with their lights flashing. There's no doubt in my mind that Mr. Brooks would understand a parade was going on. We also know it was not yet dark.
Yeah, and he also likes to pretend like he's dumb, like he doesn't understand, but he does understand all of that. Like he has good mind to flee. Like that was the thing that killed him. Like he tried to flee and dump his jacket, his sweater, his shoe. He lost his shoes. I don't think he meant to get rid of the shoes, but he did all of this. That means that he understands, that he knows there's consequences that's coming, and he just didn't want to deal with them.
Dusk. This was from the battalion chief, who talked about when he arrived after that first alert at 4:39, it was not yet dark, it was dusk. I think that aids to the visibility that Mr. Brooks would have seen all of these people. This is not under cover of night. It's, of course, downtown Waukesha. We saw city lights and many of the street lights I'm referring to in many of the videos as well that would have been on or coming on. We know just past Barstow, he strikes his first victim, Nicole White. She was with Remax Services.
Again, he is hearing all of this, all of that he did, and he's just staring into the ceiling, into the wall. He doesn't have any reaction. He doesn't care. He's good. His conscience is clear.
With the hot air balloon, if anyone's seen that, we saw it in the video, that is unmistakable what that is. That would get anyone's attention. If this was a mistake, if he was lost, this was his very first opportunity to stop and do the right thing after causing injury to a person. But he didn't. He did not stop. And then, of course, the Waukesha South Band. It's hard not to think about what I watched and not have this reaction. Those were images that frankly kept me up at night, that I saw over and over and over. For their band director, she is a hero to me, to get up on the stand, to talk about, and that was Sarah Waymeyer Aparicio, to identify each one of her students, talk about their formation, talk about what she saw.
Yeah, look at that. That's what a human being does. She's not even related to all these people. She can understand that it's a heart-wrenching moment. And she feels that. And Mr. Brooks is just staring dead into the wall.
So strong for all of you. Mr. Brooks had another opportunity to stop. This wasn't one isolated person that he could claim, I didn't know I struck someone. This was driving over people. What Kyle Jewell described as the SUV went over people like they were big, old speed bumps. I know the Green children were injured around there. Thankfully, their physical injuries were minor, and I know I could probably spend a long time talking about the injuries of the band members, and I'm not going to go through that. They were significant. It was horrific. Thankfully, none of them were killed. Moving on to Burris Logistics. Between the band and the Blazers,
yes,
that is where Kelly...
Yes, you are muted. Yes, you are muted. You know that that's what he's saying right now. I don't need to read his lips. He leans into the microphone and he's asking, am I muted? And yes, you are.
Graybow and her 10-year-old daughter, Adelia, were in that adorable Cindy Lou Who costume. And what struck me, and Kelly referenced this in her statement yesterday, was seeing the tires go past her head after she was hit. Delia had major injuries as well. And then, of course, the footage from the Waukesha Blazers. And Jeff Rogers talked both at the trial, he testified, and he gave a statement yesterday about, again, having to come into this courtroom, talk about all of those who were with him, who were injured, and of course, little Jackson Sparks. Another video that frankly is very difficult to watch and hard to unsee. You heard not only Jeff, but Josh Craner talk about what happened, and Josh, of course, being struck. And then the Extreme Dance Group. I didn't fully understand the extent of their injuries until hearing from many of the victims yesterday. I now understand why one of the girls called her aunt and said, "My entire team is dead," because that's what it looked like. It was horrific. And to think of those two brave young ladies who got up during this trial to testify about what they saw, what they did, Jamie and Alyssa, your dancers are proud of you, and because of you, justice has been served. We heard from others, spectators, Deborah Ramirez, regarding herself and her son. A moment that sticks out to me was really Mr. Brooks trying to chastise her for not seeking medical attention right away.
Yeah, he did that to all of the witnesses. He was like, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, you didn't seek, you were more concerned on watching the vehicle than looking out for your kids. He always tried to attack everyone that got up into the stand, like even his witnesses. Like he attacked his own witnesses.
Her response was perfect. She waited due to the number of injured and all the blood she saw. Understandable. Not something to be chastised for. And then moving on, and again, I know I'm not mentioning everybody. These are just some of the highlights that, and I should call them lowlights, not highlights, but some of the testimony and evidence that really, really impacted the court. Stephanie Bonesteel and her husband testified about what Citizens Bank was doing, hearing the impact against Jane, a very loud thud and an audible gasp from the crowd. Her husband, Adam, was driving the support vehicle, and when he was being cross-examined about why he didn't see the driver, again, he just simply said, "I thought it was my wife that had been hit. All I saw was the red poncho." And the only time we ever heard about brake lights was when Jane Kulik was on that vehicle and he braked so he could get her off the top and run her over. We heard from Matthew Harris, who talked about the red SUV coming straight at them and then veering and going in the direction of the dancing grannies. What I wrote down from his testimony is he's a combat vet, and this is what he said: "I've never saw anything like this in such a safe area." At this point, I believe that Owen was struck, Kelsey was struck. Probably another miracle, given the injuries she sustained, with a tear in her spleen, significant road rash, cuts, requiring facial surgery. What Mr. Knapp described the driver as having eyes completely wide open. And then next we heard from Laura Thien, one of the dancing grannies. She talked about the sisterhood.
Yeah, she was great.
Another brave woman came in, talked about what happened to that group. 7 people injured from her group, 4 fatalities. She said, "It all happened in a matter of seconds. All I seen was bodies. It looked like a war." The 6 people who were killed suffered multiple blunt force traumatic injuries, severe, significant, some dying instantly. I was impressed by both Dr. Scheel and Dr. Bidzricki. Dr. Bidzricki for her attention to detail, her looking at that vehicle, inspecting it, looking at the heights where certain damage was done, and it being consistent in height with the individuals that she did the autopsies on. And of course, Dr. Scheel and both of these individuals have...
Look at this. This is the face of evil. Like, he doesn't need to laugh or do anything like that. But this look, this emotionless stare into the void is what you need to remember from this guy. Is that he doesn't really care. He's not sorry about what he did. He did it. He knows he did it. But he rationalized it to the point that he doesn't care. He's just like, why do you keep talking about this?
Testified before me, but Dr. Scheel, very shaken from the autopsy of little Jackson Sparks. We then, continuing on, heard from Father Witter, saw an SUV flying down the road, heard thuds. It was faster than anyone in their right mind would be going. And then Lucas Hallmark, the off-duty police officer who was walking with his family on that day. You could feel, it was palpable when he testified about having the wherewithal to try to get his kids out of the way, throwing his 3-year-old as far as he could out of the way. You could see the pain on his face when he talked about not being that successful with his 7-year-old. He said, "I wasn't quick enough." He testified that he thought this was a terrorist act, that SUV did not stop. And then, of course, the vehicle inspection by the State Patrol, finding no mechanical issues. There was also the Franklin Assistant Chief who attended the parade. He was near West Main Street in Maple. He provided the testimony regarding the SUV, the window being open, and the driver sticking his head out, looking out. He testified how he thought perhaps it was either a medical emergency, maybe even a mechanical issue, but it was clear once that SUV passed him and he saw that driver. He saw you, Mr. Brooks. No panic, no distress. His heart sank. He knew it was not a medical emergency. The body language just didn't fit. It did not believe it was mechanical at that point either.
And he wasn't. Like, we all know that he wasn't. Because if that would have been the case, that would have been his defense. Like, all along, if his mom will tell him about this class action lawsuit before the trial, he would have based his entire defense on that. Like, trying to discredit the mechanical inspector, trying to say that he couldn't stop. But he didn't do that.
And then he saw the vehicle crank to the right. As he testified, he seemed excited about what he had done. Another off-duty police officer, this one from Wauwatosa, talked about how he saw Mr. Brooks after the fact crash the vehicle, hear him yell out an expletive and run southbound. With his sweatshirt still on, we all saw that video. Of Of course, at one point, Officer Skolton had contact. And as he testified, he put things together. Keep in mind all of the radio traffic, right, about one person, then like 15 people, and another 15. It was very apparent to him that although he was on the far end, he was around the dogleg on Wisconsin and Maine, that a vehicle had driven through the parade. He saw this vehicle. Of course, at that point, it was heavily damaged. He made the decision to use deadly force. What did he do after? What did Darrell Brooks do after? We crashed the vehicle. He fled the scene in a hurry. He changed his appearance, took off his sweatshirt, loses his shoes, I think in a hurry to get out of there, not caring that they had fallen off. He puts his hair up. We saw that on a number of videos. He asked unsuspecting people to use their phone to call an Uber, all within minutes of all of.
And not even an Uber. Like her mom had to order a lift for him. Like, he couldn't even have the phone of a taxi or something. He's so dumb.
This happening.
But I guess it's a good thing that he's dumb.
He was in such a hurry to get out of there, he left his phone in the SUV. He calls his mother, who arranges for an Uber. We heard from the Uber driver. He never showed up. It was nearby, ultimately, where he was found. And then, of course, the ring footage of his contact with Daniel Ryder. That is at 5:01 p.m. Minutes after all of this happened. Mr. Ryder was astute, noticing that after Mr. Brooks being in his home for maybe 8 to 9 minutes, he saw squads driving by. I think you could say his gut told him something wasn't right. And he had Mr. Brooks go onto the porch, of course, after having given him a sandwich, given him a coat to wear. Ultimately asks him for his coat back. And then, of course, the arrest. This is where some of the lies become evident. Mr. Brooks claims, ultimately, when he's being interviewed by Detective Carpenter, they have to actually seek medical clearance for him because he claims that he was thrown to the ground when he was arrested. He was not. That video is very clear. He cooperated. He laid down. There was no use of force used at all to take him into custody.
None.
But we know ultimately that he lies about what he was doing in Waukesha, how he got there, who he was with. He lies about having contact with Erica Patterson the day before. We know when he's found, he has the Ford Key credit card, not only in his name, but one, whether it's a credit card or like a benefits card, but it's in the name of Erica Patterson, and of course an ID for himself, a state-issued ID.
Yeah, he even steals Erica's food card. Like, who does that?
The Ford itself is registered in his mom's name. It's the same address that's on his ID, and there was documentation found in the Ford Escape. He's now in custody. He's taken to the substation, ultimately taken to Waukesha Memorial Hospital. What's notable about the video and audio clips that this court reviewed from the hospital, Mr. Brooks is calm. He's coherent. There's no obvious signs of impairment, no obvious signs or really any signs of mental distress. He makes statements that he's not from the area. He doesn't appear disoriented or confused. At some point, there's kind of a jovial atmosphere between him and one of the detectives. The next day, he lies to Detective Carpenter, denies driving to Waukesha. I got a ride. He makes up the story about a tan Kia.
Marcus.
He's very nondescript and vague with the information that he provides. And over the course of those 5 hours, he never once references the parade. He never once says there was another driver. Of course, they start talking to him initially about the domestic altercation because by that time it's very clear a link had been made between Erica Patterson and the call that police originally received of the domestic, or at least an altercation near Frame Park, and Mr. Brooks. We also know, because of the bond conditions in the 2 felony cases, he's not supposed to have any contact with her whatsoever. But he does. At no time during the 5 hours on November 22nd does he make any admissions. Does he show any concern for any of the victims? No empathy, only lies, only concern for himself, for his family. Can I have a phone call? He does not provide, and I said this already, the name of anyone else that could be driving that vehicle. At one point, Detective Carpenter says, one of 2 people drove through the Waukesha Christmas parade. Either a God-fearing person who screwed up or the malicious guy. Darrell Brooks' response is, don't spin it. One of the things that has become abundantly clear throughout this trial, Darrell Brooks understands exactly what he's doing. His comprehension is fine. I have absolutely no concerns and have never had any concerns throughout this case and throughout this trial, or even through the past day and a half regarding his competency.
No, he's competent. He is aware. He is not. He doesn't have a condition that limits him in any way. He knows what he's doing.
He's intelligent. He's deliberate. He's purposeful.
I mean, intelligent is a little too far. He knows what he's doing.
He made nuanced arguments during this trial, one about the right to counsel versus the right to the assistance of counsel. That's a sophisticated legal argument, not the product of someone who doesn't understand.
And those were not his arguments, though. He didn't come up with any of those. He was coached into saying that. All of the stuff that he did was coached by someone else. None of that was from his research. None of that was something that he thought about. It was something that's the reason why he always wanted to come back to his cell, because he needed that coaching. If he didn't have it one day, he didn't know what to do the next one.
He asked questions on cross regarding tint, horns. He brought up the recall after the fact. He talked and asked questions about, question about barricades, police being at the intersection. Although we never fully understood what his defense was, what became very apparent to me as I reread through all of my notes is that from the very beginning, he wanted to argue jury nullification. If you go back to his opening statements, he talked about power and the jury doing the right thing. He repeated that theme during his closing statement. At one point, he objected to evidence based upon a violation of one of the court's pretrial rulings. Again, a pretty sophisticated objection that resulted in the court striking an exhibit that had previously been received. Today, he spent close to 2 hours talking on his own behalf without any notes. He covered a variety of topics. I want to talk next about, here's my note that I found.
All right, I'm gonna have to cut it here. I need to go. I need to go to work. But we're gonna come back in the next episode with the closing and the sentencing of Mr. Brooks. So be ready for that. Thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful day. I'm sorry for not posting videos as much. I wish we were back in December when I had all the time to make all these daily videos. But I'll try to make it as good as I can. Have a great day. Bye-bye.